I'm Megan Hamilton, and this is the Embracing Enchantment podcast. Today's guest is an author, poet, and a witch. I came to know of her through a program we were both taking, and then soon realized that she was part of a subscription and newsletter that I belong to called Tamed Wild. She has an MFA in poetry from Sarah Lawrence College and is an initiated green witch. Her recently published book, Word Witch: How to Call Upon and Cultivate the Creative Magic Within You, has just been released. Please welcome the magical Kate Belew. Hi, Kate.
Hi, Megan. Hi, listeners. Thanks so much for having me.
I'm so happy that you're here, and congratulations on your beautiful, beautiful book.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome. One of the things that I really loved is in your introduction and in your, like your, what's that called? When you're like celebrating your book, you're sending it to people. The book is for, what's that called? At the beginning.
Like the dedication or
Yeah,
the introduction, forward?
Dedication.
I'm like, which one?
The dedication. You wrote, "To my younger self in the fairy garden, longing to write books and move to New York City. This is for you." And it actually brought a tear to my eye because it's so lovely. And I wonder if you could talk a little bit. I'm going to be shuffling cards and I'll pull a card in a sec. Can you talk a little bit to your journey of being that kid and then now it's actually happened?
Yeah. I mean, I think in some ways, like time is always happening all at once, like I think that younger self was very wise and knew what she wanted for our life. And so I think that I feel very grateful to be living into the vision that she had. And so much of that has been through looking backwards to things that she already knew in that fairy garden. But, and that landscape of childhood, of poetry, of the creativity that was given to me by parents and teachers have been all the steps on the path to this book being born. And so in a way, it feels like all part of the spiral. And, I couldn't have done it without her very present in the process. And so I feel very grateful to still be connected to that younger self.
I really like that.
Thanks.
It just speaks to honoring, okay, I guess that's what the card is. It speaks to honoring all the parts of you and like specifically letting her come during the process, knowing that, she was kind of the one who initiated it in the first place.
Mm-hmm.
So nice. Okay. I did kind of explain to Kate before I got on this podcast that I'm feeling a bit chaotic today. And so the card is somewhere on the floor.
I love it.
But of course, it is not readily available to see.
Ooh, this feels magical in a strange way.
So this is not unusual. One time right before a reading, I dropped cards. So I live in a really old house and the floorboards in my office are they don't always join at the same places.
Ooh.
And so I lost 3 cards right before a reading down into the floor. And so I had to MacGyver it with like a pencil and some chewing gum and like stick it down to pull them up. And it was like, it was like death and the tower and like possibly the devil. Like it was bananas. But I got them like seconds before a reading. And then the other day, I do my tarot practice every day. I had put my cards away as I do, closed up shop at the end of the day, opened the door to come in the next day to start my day. And there was 3 cards underneath my chair. And like, I keep a giant selenite crystal on top of my cards when I'm not using them. So I don't know what, here we go. I don't know what happened there that day, but it's not unusual to get like things just sort of happen. Okay.
The spirit of the house wanted in.
Yeah, exactly. It needs a bit of attention. So here we have the
Mhm.
10 of cups,
Wow.
which is interesting because I pulled this for a client earlier today. And traditionally, we love this card. I mean, it looks like a happy card. We associate cups a lot of the time with love, right? And it relates back to the element of water.
Mhm.
Uh, and something that's interesting, and so tens are also a completion, but one thing I've been leaning into lately is this idea of some of these cards being stage cards.
Mm.
So, you know, it looks like they're on a stage, and what's happening is a backdrop. We know that Pamela Coleman Smith, who is the creator of these cards, was very into theater and did all kinds of really neat stuff like shadow theater and sets. I was very heavily involved in that world. And so one of the things we can look at with this card is we know what we are encultured to believe is a good life or a happy life, but what would your backdrop be? So if the world is a stage, which is kind of
Mm.
cheesy to say, what does it look like? What are you celebrating? Because this backdrop can be interchanged based on however you want to live your life. And so at the same time, it's asking you, what do you want your life to look like? What brings you joy? It's also suggesting to you that you don't necessarily have to have this one that we,
Mm.
for the most part, have been brought up to believe is the sort of quintessential good life. Uh, yeah. Does that speak to you at all, Kate?
It does. And I mean, looking at the imagery too, are we meant to read them as happening at the same time, or are they younger selves next to older selves? Because that
Right.
it seems kind of potent to what we were speaking about, just because the same color of dress that's mirrored in
Totally.
the two. And the sort of like ritual of play that then turns into this sort of like moment of fulfillment or completion. It seems like a beautiful acceptance of that sort of time happening all at once, you know?
I absolutely love that take. And it's one of my favorite things about tarot, and I've talked about this on the podcast before, which is I think part of the reason I enjoy it so much is because there's always a fresh perspective. There's always a new take. There's always some small detail that I haven't noticed before. And like, I keep making up the number, but it's somewhere around 25 years that I've been reading cards. And I just love that you can always find something new, to look at. Actually, that reminds me, how long have you been with Tamed Wild?
I began working with Shelby in late summer of 2020.
Okay.
Mhm.
So you are probably familiar with this little magic bag
Yes, I am.
covered in cat hair. Sorry.
Love it.
I
Yes.
know. I was
Yes.
introduced to Tame Wild because my friend Erica got me a subscription box
Oh,
as a thank you. Yeah, I know. So it's neat that you're here because, I know our paths haven't really crossed, but there's been like all of these interesting intersections. And Tamed Wild is such a beautiful, like wonderful space. There's so many things happening with it.
yeah.
Um, how did you get involved?
So the company was created by Shelby Bundy. People might know her by the Moon in Carolina online. She started with an in-person apothecary in California, and I want to say in about
Mm.
2016. I'm sorry, Shelby, if that date isn't right, but so it started with this in-person space, which is how Kristen Lisenby met Shelby through working in that space before Kristen moved to the Azores. So then at a certain point, Kristen, right before 2020, moved to the Azores to tend to a family homestead there. which is where she still lives. And then Shelby ended up moving to Hendersonville, North Carolina. And then Tamed Wild became an online space. And somewhere in the midst of all of this, I was working in New York. I was getting my master's degree. I was doing work for an apothecary here on the Lower East Side, and we carried some of Shelby's decks. And so I got in touch with Shelby about doing some writing, who then connected me to Kristen, who was doing writing for Tamed Wild, living in the Azores. And Kristen and I became friends. And so then we just, through love of witchcraft, stayed in touch until I went freelance full time. And Kristen was like, I've been talking to my friend Shelby about doing this podcast for Tamed Wild. I'd love to have a co-host. Is this something you might be interested in? And so I was kind of invited along on that journey. And then I started supporting Shelby doing content marketing and social media, helping with the blog. And ever since then, now there's an online education community space. So I teach in there. There's retreats. Like, it's really been this beautiful platform for education and community. And then just like the development of fun, accessible ritual tools. And so I'm just, so grateful for both Kristen and Shelby and all of the people that I've met through this space, because it's been such a hub and a circle for magical happenings.
It's so cool. I love hearing that story. And I have learned so much from the newsletter. I mean, there's beautiful, whether it's, mythology or ritual or, all kinds of different angles and aspects to magic. What a beautiful and wonderful group to be part of and get to work in and practice in.
Yeah, Kristen and I have now recorded, as of this morning, 168 episodes together. And so we were reflecting, we're like, wow, like that's just the amount of conversations we've been able to have, and just learning together for all of these years, and just in that microcosm of the Tamed Wild world and universe. But yeah, I am very, very grateful to be a part of it.
Yeah, and I'm sure they are grateful to have you as well. One of the things, and this is early on in your, like I said, gorgeous book, you say, and I think this is so important, there is no one way to be a witch. Certainly for me, my gravitation towards magic and magical practices and, learning about different modalities of spirituality is the fact that there is an open space for people to be creative, for people to be true to themselves, and to gather different pieces that speak to them. When you say this in your book, can you talk a little bit about why you say it and what you mean in the context of word witch?
Yeah, I think in the work that I've done, one of the prevailing themes that I've seen people come to me with is like, oh, I feel this way, but I'm not this, or but I'm not this, and so I thought it was so important to talk about this, because I always want to be encouraging of people to embrace the things that they feel in their life. And I think that there's very few things that we get to really claim for ourselves in this world. And the power of that, like the power of naming ourselves for what we are, what we feel, or, how we want to move through the world. I mean, working with archetypes like that, I think, can be hugely important. And so I always want to just push people a little bit towards freedom in that way, to be like, yes, I am this way. I feel this way. I want to be a part of this. And, all of us, we come from such different lives and backgrounds and ancestry and teachings and, intentions and wants and dreams and desires. And I think, making things prescriptive or dogmatic can kind of detract from that, instead of all of us kind of meeting around that hearth and being like, look how different we are, but in us all being different and unique and magical, we really are the same in that way. And so it's like it's an invitation. I wanted to reach a hand across the page and be like, let's go, and that was really important to me.
Yes. And I love that it's at the beginning as well, because there are, if you're somebody who's starting to get interested in, let's say you're like, oh, tarot, I've seen a lot about that. I'm curious about that. And straight off the hop, you find somebody who is like, this is how it must be practiced. You must be given a deck, or, it has to be wrapped in silk, and all of the different ways that that practice is sort of talked about. Then it might feel sort of like choky, like it, in the same way that you might reject religion specifically because of the dogma attached to it, or the very prescriptive ways that you were just talking about. And so setting that tone right from the beginning, which is, you get to be how you are as you move through the abundance of ceremony and ritual and practices that you talk about in the book. Then it does give that sense of freedom straight away. And I love that was, an intentional way of opening up, I guess, the circle.
Thank you. Yeah, I guess too, like I didn't want to force the word witch upon anyone that didn't feel like it was for them, for a variety of reasons too. So it goes kind of both ways. It's like, well, maybe it's like a possibility for later, or maybe this word isn't for me, but then why is it not for me? And so getting curious about that, I think, can be a really potent place to begin something too. It's like, what am I drawn to? What do I know? What do I reject in that way? And then what do I, by saying no to something too, I'm also saying yes to something else. So like, what does that mean for me as, someone that is inherently creative in the world, because everyone is creative, and that's sort of the thesis of things. But yeah.
Well, and that actually drives me to my next quote, which is, you put forth a spell, and it's like, 1, everyone is creative. 2, everything is connected. And 3, writing is magic. And what that does as well is, we've all met people who really struggle seeing themselves as creative beings, right? They're like, well, I don't know how to draw, or I don't play music, or, they think of like there's this kind of like set of things that are creative and everything else is not creative. And again, you're allowing, very specifically through your words, which is kind of meta in the whole thing,
Yes.
but allowing everybody to see themselves within the structure of the book, and all the different activities that you can do. But it's this kind of gentle allowance that gives people the opportunity possibly to see themselves in a different way, right?
Wait, say more about that.
Well, so if you didn't see yourself as a creative person, but you were really curious about the book and the different, opportunities that you put forth of different things you could try, you might say, well, I'm not going to do the writing part, because like, you might be interested, let's say, in the rituals or the spells, and you might not do the writing part because you're like, oh, I'm not really a creative person. But here it's like, everyone is creative. So now you get to see, okay, well, what happens if for now, if I look at myself as a creative person, if I look at myself as a writer, then what do I make as a writer? Which again is like, it's a portal that maybe hadn't been opened before. And I think it speaks to your intentionality around the book of helping create the virtual altar of being able to put yourself there.
Yeah, it's always interesting to me when people don't see themselves as creative. I was recently telling this story and then I actually reconnected with the friend around it that had told me this, but she was studying as a forensic chemist, and she was trying to argue with me that she wasn't creative. And I just remember this very funny argument with her, not argument, but like discussion, where I was
Right.
like, your forensic that is so like
Yeah.
that's so creative. But she
Yeah.
was like, I don't write poems like you. And I'm like, well, I mean, chemistry creative, like our planet is creative, cooking a meal is creative. People that do all sorts of work, it's so creative. And so, it's just always interesting to me. And that's why I wanted to put it in there, because I was like, okay, everybody, we have to get out of our own way a little bit,
Yes. Yes. Yes, 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 yes. Um, Something I deeply love about your book is that it frames word witching around intentionality. So, with lots of specifics and practices to try, you talk about altars and the 4 directions while giving lots of rituals like cord cutting, ceremony, and casting, as well as journal prompts. There's so much actionable stuff, and the whole process is steeped in ceremony. And so, thinking about ceremony and intentionality, um, what, when you were coming up with the idea for your book and thinking about the practices that you wanted to talk about, how prevalent was the idea of intentionality in your creation process?
Yeah, it, I'm like, how do I want to say that?
Because, I mean, like, magic in it of itself is intentionality. Like,
Yeah.
that's the behind it, but you're giving vessels to practice that within.
Yeah. Well, I feel like, I mean, in the spirit of getting out of our own way, like ceremony and ritual is a way to kind of get past that, I think, because it makes us so present that we can just be with
Mm.
whatever is. And if, I know that, sometimes it's not easy to get into that space even, but once we're there, or we're doing something, it kind of transcends that. But I was working with my editor on just kind of like the structure of the book, and we were thinking about like the ways to invite people through it. And I was trying to get to a place where I really wanted people to see the change in their world and then to feel the change in themselves. And that's how we kind of came to the altar space, because I was like, if we are
Mm.
adding things as we move, we can see a physical representation of that which we have learned or changed. It's like if I put a bowl of water next to a candle, suddenly like my worldview has changed in a way, even if it's just the worldview of your desk. And then you can feel, I mean, it's an as above, so below sort of thing. It's, you think the subtle changes as we associate new things with those sort of correspondences kind of makes real the magic in the world. And so I think when we're trying to get someone, to believe that they're creative, or believe that they're a writer, or believe that they can make something as simple as putting a thing on a foundation or making a commitment to ourselves can change everything. And so I think that that was sort of the intention that I was trying to carve out, was by being like, okay, like look or feel or see the difference by like bringing it through the body in this way, especially because writing can be so in the head. And I think that that's where I see people really get caught up in it, because it's like, you can just make the first mark. You can just write the sentence. The sentence can be silly. It can be anything. It just matters that you do it. And so I think that that sort of structure and intention and altar building was part of supporting that.
Yeah. Um, in my public speaking work, so in my other life, I'm also a speaking coach. One
Mm,
of the things we talk a lot about is the intention, because that, for whatever reason, and perhaps it's just a sign of the times, we forget that, like, it's important to set intentions for ourselves for anything that we're doing, not only just, like for goals or whatever, but also just to get ourselves centered and focused on why we're there. Because it's so
mm,
easy to not be intentional and to not be connected even to your own desires or to your, next week.
yeah.
And so even just putting that in practice as its own goal, right? Which is just to be present and intentional,
Mm,
means that you've got meaning towards why you're doing what you're doing. And so in this case, physically creating an altar that you're intentionally putting pieces on to help connect you. And as you say, help embody the magic that you're working to create with creativity. Uh, like, just to dumb it down a bit, it just means you're going to do it more because like it's there in front of you. You've done a thing around it. It's set it in your brain, which is very different than, just scrolling through your phone for 2 hours and being like, oh, whoops.
yeah. Yeah, I mean, and part of the inspiration for this kind of came from when I was at Sarah Lawrence. I was in a writing workshop with Araceli Gourmet, who's an amazing poet, and she had us create these sort of like different interactive poetry projects. And so what I did was I deconstructed an altar in my home that I built, and I brought it to Sarah Lawrence, and I gave everyone an item in the class. So it's like someone got a deer skull, someone got a candle, someone got a selenite tower, someone got a cedar or a seashell or all of these things. And with them, I gave them a line of a poem. And then I was encouraging everybody to write a line in conversation with that poem. And what we did was we sat in a circle, and then I had everybody read the line that they received and then read the line that they answered with, and then take both and put them up on the altar that we had built on the windowsill. And so by the time, we had done this, it was like a 24-line poem. We'd created an altar on the page that I could clearly see when I stitched the poem together. But then we'd also created the altar in the windowsill of the room, and that sort of symbolic action, that sort of ritual of movement, when everybody bought into it too, I was like, okay, this is how we all make magic together. And I was so inspired to see how we could write together too, because I think we think of writing as this solo activity, but I was like, look what happens if I give a friend a line and then they give me a line back, and then suddenly we've made something new that we wouldn't have created had we not been in dialogue with each other.
Oh my gosh, I love this so much. It reminds me of this. I did a deep dive into haiku and ancient Japanese poetry for an art project a long time ago. And I learned about, where haiku comes from. And it's actually from this game called Haku that priests and young people studying to be priests played. And so there's like a structure around it. I think it was like a 14-line poem, and they'd start with the opening line, and then you'd fold up the paper and pass it to the next person, and then they'd have to do the next line. And whoever's turn it was, like, understood what their line was within the structure. And we know, like, haiku has lots of different markers. Like, there has to be a season, or there's like a different beats to different lines, and then they'd end up with this like poem that very similar to what you created, which was this co-created piece, and it was just like a game that they played.
It sounds like those surrealist party games too, like Exquisite Corpse, if you've ever heard of that. But
no, I don't know anything about that.
as like a part of the like surrealist movement, like the Andre Breton kind of world of things, which is kind of how we get automatic writing, which at least a form of it. He didn't invent it, but there's a collection of surrealist party games, and in it is the Exquisite Corpse, which is a kind of similar pass along poem that works really fun at a party. And you can do it with drawing too, which is really amazing.
Now I just want to do that at the next party that I'm at. I'm just like, here's the thing. Like, write instructions for each line and then just pass it on. Actually, that's a great idea. I really want to do that now. Okay.
That's always me at the dinner party. I'm like, okay, guys, what is everyone wishing for?
Yeah.
Like, favorite thing about the last year, and now what's the favorite thing about next year for your birthday? Like, that's definitely always me.
No, me too. I'm like, here's the pieces of paper, everybody. Gather around and grab a pen.
Write your wish on the bay leaf. I'll burn it.
Yeah. I know. I love it. earlier in this podcast, we had herbalist Camille Freeman speaking to the power of herbs and herbal magic. And you are an initiated green witch. And also, so at the time of the book, you were an apprentice. And are you still working as an apprentice?
I'm an apprentice in Robin Rose Bennett's clinic now. So I completed the apprenticeship, the 3-year apprenticeship. And then after that, you can continue on working as an apprentice in her clinic. And so I've now done that for almost finished my 2nd year, and I can do 1 more year. So I'll be done next year. But yeah.
And then, I mean, do you plan to open your own practice? What are your plans?
I don't. I just wanted to learn, honestly,
I
just
love
as
that.
much as I could from
Mhm.
Robin Rose Bennett, who I just think is an incredible teacher and mentor and herbalist and writer and author. And the opportunity to, just sit with first going to her house monthly and having a community of, 11, 12 other women in the program to be with was like so important to my life. And then after that, just learning to see how Robin works to act as a guide to people's healing. It's just so informative in
Mm.
so many different ways. And the plants will always be, close to my heart. I love working with plants so much. But yeah, no plans in the now to work as a clinical herbalist. But I do just I love Robin's work, and I love my plant allies.
Have have you tapped into the telepathy tapes, that podcast?
You are the 3rd person to recommend it to me, so it sounds like I must turn that on this afternoon.
So, I mean, as with all things, there's lots of different things to consider.
Mm.
And I was absolutely could not stop listening to it with the first season. And then uh a a couple of things happened that I was like, oh, something just started to feel a little bit just maybe like wasn't really sure about it. But then
Mm.
season 2 just came out. And the reason I brought this up is because one of the episodes, and maybe this is why people are asking you about it specifically too, is because one of the episodes is about people who speak to plants
Oh,
and like
wow.
share language. And it is like, uh, it is unbelievably amazing. Um, so even like just as a starting place for that, and if you're listening to the podcast here today as well, thinking about what Kate just talked about with her love of plants and what we learned about with Camille, you might find this episode really fascinating too. Actually, that reminds me too. When we had Hannah, the suburban witch, and
Mm.
she talked about how she talks to her plants. She uses a pendulum
Oh,
and like make sure that they like where they are. Do they need more water? Do they want to be in a different place in the room? Um, and I love this. I mean, I love this idea that, um, we can connect to plants on even more of a deep level than just, like going in the back and clipping your Melissa for the day and doing whatever you're going to be doing.
yeah.
And most people find that the more you spend time with plants, so all plants, uh, the more, I mean, there's so much research about the benefits of being out in nature and all of the different exchanges that are happening.
Mhm.
Um, but the language of plants is what keeps coming up, and it's so fascinating. Like they've been studying mushrooms, and they have clocked, I think it's like 50 words, like in mushroom language. Uh,
It's amazing.
it's like, it just kind of also makes you rethink everything too. And goes back
Totally.
to intentionality, right?
Yeah. I mean, I use poetry. I use writing to connect with them and to give them voice. I was thinking
Mm,
about if do you know The Wild Iris by Louise Gluck, the poet?
I I don't think so.
There's this fabulous collection of poems called The Wild Iris, and there is the title poem. But she basically kind of channels the voices of these different beings, so to speak. But there's this line in the Wild Iris, and it says, everything returns from, it's something like everything returns from oblivion again to find a voice. And it's just like, yeah, incredible. But I had this wonderful poetry teacher named Diane Seuss at Kalamazoo College, and together we did a fellowship at the Pierce Cedar Creek Institute. So they gave me a writing fellowship for the summer where I could kind of just like follow around scientific researchers who are doing a variety of projects. So like thermoregulation of dragonflies, for example, or preservation of the Massasauga rattlesnake. And I would go with my notebook out into the swamp and go catch snakes with snake tongs and put them into a pillowcase in a bucket so that they could go mark their tails and like watch the whole process. And I was kind of like, I'm the writer. Like, I don't want to touch the rattlesnakes. And then they were like, nope, we need all the hands we can get. So I was like, I guess I'm catching rattlesnakes today. And so, but like spending that time out there, and then what I would do is I would go like listen in a different way with the page to try to channel the voice that I had heard through, again, inspired by Louise's work, and created this collection of poetry called Voicing the Natural. And I think that was kind of like one of the first conscious or intentional experiences that I had had with that sort of listening to plants, like channeling through Lady Slipper or talking to, cleavers or Artemisia vulgaris. And then I realized later that it had been something that I was always doing, because I talk about this in the book, but there's a poem about an oak tree that falls. And it's like my first conscious memory I have of writing a poem. But my grandparents lived in this space called Oak Hill, and one of these oaks fell one night. I mean, it was massive. And as like I think it was in 2001, and I went to go see it, and I felt like I had heard this voice, right? Like it was like about the oak tree. And I ran home and I wrote out this poem, and it's kind of the first like record I have of being like, okay, like there's a connection here. There's a listening here. And so it's, yeah, been very formative.
Sometimes I really think a lot about what we probably knew and then spend most of our lives then trying to get back to. Do you know Amy Miranda's book, What We've Forgotten?
No.
Okay. You might like that book. Okay. So, in this podcast, we aim to show lots of different modalities of spirituality, with the main guiding light being to help people discover rituals and initiations that help give them meaning and purpose in order to stay hopeful. And the reason for that is because we know that hopefulness is a necessary ingredient towards change. And so to that end, and, with all of this happening, can you speak to some of the ways that you stay hopeful right now? And it's okay if you don't feel hopeful, because it's like, we're not looking for, like rosy answers necessarily. You can say however you feel is what I mean to say.
I do feel hopeful. I feel hopeful because I feel like it's amazing that we exist at all. Like, I was just, that oak tree outside is beautiful. Like the fact that there's pumpkins growing in this weird patch outside of my house in Brooklyn because someone smashed a pumpkin there last year. Like,
love it.
Beautiful. Like my dog just lives in my apartment with me because I adopted him from a rescue. Beautiful. Like you and I having this conversation through the witch wide web. Beautiful. And so I do feel hopeful because of all of those amazing things about just living on Earth, how lucky we are to live on Earth. It does make me think of my uncle, who does say hope is not a strategy, though. And I do, I do also carry that with that. But I do think that we have lots of strategies. And I think that being a witch is a strategy in the world to remain hopeful, because it orients us to the magic of our planet and the magic of each other that inherent magic of each other. And it teaches us the importance of being connected to all of these things, to honor those connections, to honor these, the sacred wildness that exists, the sacred strangeness of being here. And so through that, I think that is how I do that, by claiming witch and writer, and claiming community and coven with people who believe in the same things that I do and are open to, having hard conversations, or to being in the muck of the earth together,
Mm-hmm. Yes, that's it. It's the muck of the earth. It can't be like that's the place where everything happens, right? It's that
Hmm.
murky, the moon, you know, can't always see, sometimes just going forward without any light, just putting one foot forward, and the trust that comes from that. Um, yeah, that's really lovely. Um, it is something like usually I have 3 words, and this year I just had one, and it was magic.
Mm.
And for me, it was specifically focusing on the pentacle and the idea of the magic, that everything is magic. So, it's the same with you talking about your friend who's an engineer. Um, like chemistry is magic. Chemistry
Mm.
is creativity. It's putting things together. The original creative, vessel was alchemy, and all of the ways that, you know, like we know this, and you say it like everything is
Mm.
connected. Like we know that. But then every once in a while you get this sense of, oh, I think this actually means something, than this sort of um like conceptual thing that I thought it was. This actually means everything is connected. A choice that somebody's making in Australia right now is going to affect me in 4 months. That is how everything is connected. When, when I write a book, and put it out there, and thousands and more people suddenly have like a beautiful experience from that, that is how we're connected. The internet is how we're connected. Like all of, um, yeah, I really like that. Thanks for bringing that forward.
Thanks for the question. I love that question.
It has been so nice to talk to you, and I really appreciate your time and your thoughtful answers. I'm definitely going to be sharing in the show notes how people can find your beautiful book. And, I highly recommend just even subscribing to the newsletter to get started with Tamed Wild, and start getting access to the gorgeous missives that everybody's putting out there.
Mhm.
What else? What are you doing now? What are you doing now that the book's out?
Yeah, well, first of all, thank you so much for having me. This has been such a wonderful, inspiring, magical time. And yeah, I just love being here. So thank you. And what am I up to? I write on Substack, so you can find me at Word Witch Creative Magic. I send weekly articles, full moon, new moon guides, weekly prompts, all the fun things. I also have a weekly newsletter that goes out. I'm over on Tamed Wild, like you mentioned, and on the Magic and Alchemy podcast with Kristen Lisenby. And I guess if this is we're in January, my yearly writing school opens for 6 weeks through the winter and to the end of winter. So that's the Bardo. So folks can join me there.
I love it. I love it. So lots on the go.
Mhm.
Thanks so much, Kate. This has really been a delight.
Thank you.
Okay, So you can find all the information and takeaways from today's episode in the show notes or at embracingenchantment.com. Please subscribe and follow wherever you get your podcasts. Leave a review or a voice note. I do actually love getting the voice notes. You can find out more about Kate and where to follow her in the show notes or at embracingenchantment.com. And make sure you're subscribed because we have exciting episodes coming up. And don't forget to catch up on our incredible back catalog with guests like Cult Mother, Pam Grossman, Patrick from My Morning Jacket, and of course, my best friend, author Jennifer Fawcett. Until then, here's to building an enchanted life.